How to Speak Like a Native. Hello, and welcome to another episode of English Learners Podcast. My name is Hannah. Today we're talking about something that every language learner dreams of, speaking like a native. It's the ultimate goal for many, and while it might seem like an impossible task, it's absolutely achievable with the right strategies and mindset. In this episode, we'll explore actionable steps, useful tips, and practical methods to help you get there. Let's start with the foundation, listening. Listening is, without a doubt, the cornerstone of learning to speak like a native. Think about it. When children learn their first language, they spend months, sometimes years, just listening before they start speaking. They absorb the sounds, rhythm, and intonation of the language. You need to do the same. Start by immersing yourself in the language. Watch movies and TV shows, listen to podcasts, music, or even audiobooks in the language you're learning. The goal is to hear how native speakers talk, not just the words they use, but how they string those words together. Pay close attention to their tone and how they stress certain words. For example, in English, there's a natural rhythm and stress pattern where some syllables are emphasized and others are reduced. You won't get this from a textbook, it comes from active listening. And don't just let the sounds wash over you. Be an active participant in your listening practice. Pause and repeat phrases. Try to imitate the exact way a word or sentence is pronounced. Over time, this focused practice will train your ear to pick up subtle nuances. This brings me to the next strategy, shadowing. If you haven't heard of shadowing before, it's a powerful technique where you listen to a speaker and try to repeat what they're saying in real time. Imagine you're watching a TV show and a character says, "I can't believe this is happening." Pause for a second and then say it yourself, trying to match their tone, speed, and energy. Shadowing is like a workout for your mouth muscles and brain. It trains you to think and speak in the language at a native-like pace. When you shadow, don't worry if you can't keep up perfectly. The goal isn't perfection, it's practice. The more you do it, the better you'll get. Over time, you'll notice that phrases and patterns start sticking in your mind. You'll begin to pick up on common expressions and even cultural nuances that native speakers use naturally. Speaking of cultural nuances, this is a big part of sounding native. Language is more than just vocabulary and grammar, it's deeply connected to culture. Natives don't just say words, they express emotions, attitudes, and social norms through their language. This includes using idioms, slang, contractions, and even filler words. For instance, in English, phrases like "what's up" or "let's hang out" are commonly used, but you won't find them in most language textbooks. Take the time to learn these informal aspects of the language. They're often what make you sound more relatable and natural. Watch how people interact in movies or interviews and pay attention to their word choices. You'll notice that they rarely speak in full, formal sentences. Instead of saying, "I am going to the store," a native might say, "I'm going to go to the store." Little changes like that can make your speech sound more fluid and less rigid. Now let's talk about pronunciation. Pronunciation is probably one of the biggest hurdles for language learners. It's not just about saying the words, it's about saying them in a way that's clear and understandable. A lot of learners worry about completely erasing their accent, but let me tell you something important. Having an accent is not a bad thing. Accents are a part of your identity, and they show where you come from. The goal isn't to get rid of your accent entirely, but to make sure it doesn't interfere with communication. To improve your pronunciation, start by focusing on the sounds that are unique to the language you're learning. Every language has tricky sounds that don't exist in your native tongue. For example, English learners might struggle with the th sound, while French learners might find nasal vowels challenging. Identify these problem areas and practice them repeatedly. Use tongue twisters or pronunciation apps to help you master them. Recording yourself is another excellent way to improve. When you speak, record your voice and compare it to native speakers. This can be uncomfortable at first. Most people don't like hearing their own voice, but it's incredibly effective. You'll be able to hear where you're off and make adjustments. Over time, you'll notice improvements in both clarity and confidence. Another crucial aspect of sounding native is mastering the rhythm and intonation of the language. Every language has its own music. For example, English tends to have a stress-timed rhythm, meaning some syllables are emphasized more than others. while Spanish has a syllable-timed rhythm where each syllable is given equal weight. Learning this rhythm is essential if you want to sound natural. Listen closely to native speakers and try to imitate their patterns. You can even tap your fingers or clap along to practice the rhythm while speaking. This leads us to conversation practice, which is the real game changer. You can study all the grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation rules you want, but if you're not actually speaking, you'll never achieve native-like fluency. Find ways to practice with native speakers. Language exchange platforms, online communities, or even local meetups are great places to start. If you don't have access to native speakers, don't worry, you can still practice on your own. Talk to yourself in the language, narrate your day, or even practice giving a presentation. When you're speaking, don't be afraid to make mistakes. In fact, mistakes are a sign that you're pushing yourself. No one expects you to sound perfect, and most people will appreciate the effort you're making to learn their language. The more you practice, the more confident you'll become, and the more natural your speech will sound. Another tip is to learn through context. Instead of memorizing isolated words, learn them in phrases or sentences. This not only helps you understand how the word is used, but also makes it easier to remember. For instance, instead of learning the word go, learn phrases like go to the store, go out for dinner, or go on a trip. When you practice speaking, try to use these phrases as much as possible. Let's not forget the power of repetition. Learning to speak like a native isn't something that happens overnight. It requires consistent effort and practice. Make language learning a part of your daily routine, even if it's just 10 or 15 minutes a day. The key is consistency. Over time, these small daily efforts will add up and lead to noticeable progress. Now, I want to address something that many learners struggle with: confidence. It's easy to feel self-conscious when you're trying to speak like a native. You might worry about sounding silly or making mistakes. But here's the truth. No one becomes fluent without going through that awkward phase. Even native speakers weren't born fluent. They had to learn too. Embrace the discomfort and remind yourself that every mistake you make is a step closer to your goal. Finally, remember that language learning is a journey, not a destination. Speaking like a native is a long-term goal, but that doesn't mean you can't celebrate the small victories along the way. Maybe you finally nailed that tricky pronunciation, or you understood a joke in your target language. These are all signs of progress. Be patient with yourself, stay consistent, and most importantly, enjoy the process. So, to recap, speaking like a native involves several key elements: listening, shadowing, mastering pronunciation, understanding cultural nuances, practicing rhythm and intonation, and having regular conversations. It's not about achieving perfection, but about being able to communicate naturally and confidently. That's all for today's episode. I hope these tips inspire you to keep working toward your language goals. Remember, you're not just learning a language, you're connecting with a new culture, meeting new people, and opening up a world of opportunities. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, happy learning.